Hello, welcome to the second episode of You Know the Drill with yours truly. I should have set up everything, but I want to try it like this. Uh, I want to try to. What did I wanted to try? Yeah, next time. There's always going to be a next time. I feel terrible because I didn't. I gotta redo this again. I didn't really buff my nails. I'm gonna do that. And you know what? If I did, yeah, we're not talking like that. I don't know if I have a topic for today. I don't know if I have a topic for today. I'm trying to be as classy as possible. Right. So excuse me for not being as classy. Uh, how was everything so far? Hopefully everything is better. Yeah, it's all about improvement. So, I would like to talk about politics. But I don't know if a lot of people talk about politics on their channel when they, you know. Yeah, I want to keep it classy. I don't have anything to say, but I do want to mention how, you know, you know, in politics they have like speakers and stuff, right? Whether they're like, you know, um, press secretaries or right. And it's just like, they have to talk to a lot of people. You know, they're the speaker and stuff. And then that's another thing as well. hmm But they also have to, remain classy under pressure. Right. What are some of the things that they tolerate? And should we care about that? Right, within politics. Now we know that politics have changed, over the years. And even media has changed over the years, and I think, they have to, you know, acclimate to, to that. I don't know how things are now. I'm gonna be honest with you. I haven't been looking at the news for, I want to say, 5 years. So I don't know how, I don't know what's going on. Even with Biden's presidency, I didn't pay attention to it. I know it seems weird. Did I vote? I didn't even vote. So that was my first time not voting. I know, what have I been doing? It seems like, you know, it's not that, I have any like records against me. Right, because I understand how certain things can affect people's voting rights. If that's not also a political issue, but we're not talking about that. But we can talk about, I mean, I can talk about politics. Uh, and, it's not like I'm on, well, I guess I do have some type of a strike against me, right? I don't go out much, but I'm not like on any type of, what is it? Like probation, let's just say. hmm Or work release. Work release. Where you can only go out when you're working. hmm Anyways, now how did politics? I mean, how did the media change during during Biden's presidency? Like, how was his press secretary? Who was his press secretary? I don't know anybody in his cabinet member. I mean, other than Kamala Harris. Right. Now I remember when he was running for president. So I guess, Right, right. And I think from what I know, it seems like, everybody else who was running for the Democratic presidency or Democratic ticket, whatever they call it, um, you know, I guess they ended up getting assigned a cabinet position. Right. Who was his press secretary? I wouldn't know. However, I think because of the former president or current one, right? How did media change? With his presidency. Remember, it was during coronavirus. I'm prepared. Anyway, I know Biden had health issues, and even when he talks, right, right, they're saying because of old age and stuff. Um, and I understand Kamala had to, I guess, step in, right, as the vice president. You know how vice presidents are. But I wouldn't know because, again, I didn't follow their. I wasn't paying attention to the news. I told you I haven't watched the news, and I don't know what it is that you know, right, what was going on in the, other than the coronavirus. But as far as with the media, how was things with the media? Now that we had a president at that time, that behaved in a certain way, but also behaved in a certain way, right? Right, but he's used to politics, right? He had a career in politics, so he knows politics. It's just that he's of a certain age. How was media during that time? How was his press secretary, and uh, how was Biden's press secretary, and how did they treat others? You know, the media. And, right, they probably expected them to, you know, be more professional. Hmm. But also, the journalists and other media, they have to conduct themselves in such a way. So I guess the conversation is going to be about politics today. Well, politics is going to be about politics, but mainly the media and, what are some things that they have to tolerate, right? Right, and adjust to, and right. Was it less frustrating now that Biden was president at that time? Did they come off as, you know, you know, was it difficult for them to do their job? Or was things, much better, like a sigh of relief now that, right, get that other joke out of here, right? And the Speaker of the House, that's another thing as well. What was his or her role during that time? Was it a Democratic one? Was it a Republican one? Right. However, because of Biden having that bipartisan, support, throughout his career, even though he is a registered Democrat, you know, how did they feel about it? I'm sure they was probably happy. Right? Because, you know, right, it wouldn't have been a consecutive 8 years. I need to take out my nail lamp. I wish I would have took out my nail lamp before then. I have to be delicate. I have primer on my nails. Right. I also don't like to be out of frame. I wish, right, compared to last time. I know to do better next time. I'll be right here. Right. So with Biden's presidency, did they feel like they had it all together? That they had themselves together? That it wasn't like a circus? Now we're back to, you know, politics as they know it, right? Why do people even go into, journalism? And how do they even get their job if you are a press secretary or, you're just a journalist and you're covering, right, a political journalist? How do they go about even getting their job? And then, even with being a journalist, you know, them, right, them getting, even with them being a journalist, them being able to, never mind, never mind. Right. I mean, whatever difficulties there are, you just have to, deal with those difficulties. You know, maybe they have someone like a mentor, someone that as a guide. Mm-hmm. Right. And how do you confide in someone? It's just like, you know, maybe it's something that, right. But they have teachers, obviously, mm, maybe other, what is it again? Like peers within their industry, and do they even talk to other people outside of politics, outside of, political journalism? Do they talk about, their job? And do they, try to, also, learn tips of the trade and stuff like that and incorporate it into their own job? Right. I never thought about it like that, or I never, you know, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Right. And then think, you know, Right. Because they want to be good at their job. You learn from others as well. And I think that'll make someone a well rounded person and a better journalist. Even though, they're in, that form of journalism, politics. Right. It's nice to know people from other, right, get to network with people in other industries. I guess industries, right, right, or like different types of, we'll call it industries. That's too much. Right. And, and them only having friends in just one particular industry, how well rounded of a person are they? And does that, also translate to them being a better worker, right? Better in their, well, a better worker, a better person within their career field if they only talk to, you know, uh, similar minded people. Right. What else can they talk about, right? Other than work, and that's it. Right. Right. Unless it's on the job, right? Obviously. And maybe people don't know, right? Maybe they want to talk to people and who understand. Well, anyways, let's talk more about Biden's presidency because that's what I don't understand. So how was media during that time? were they happy to do their job? Right? And like some people think that with politics and stuff, that they don't have like much of a personality. Like they just get on, they stand up on the podium and they just talk. And that's what it is that they do. But I noticed that, different people do have different personalities. I don't know what it is with Biden's presidency. And did he have to change out any, press secretaries? That's another thing as well, right? Because Trump had two different press secretaries. I don't even want to say that name. Right. Um, Anyways, you know how many press secretaries did Biden have? Was it a male? Was it a female? Were they difficult? Were they rude and disrespectful to, other media in the what is it, in front of the White House? Right. You're right, but even in the inside, right? Because that's another thing as well. Inside and outside, they do the press secretary job. Pardon me for excuse me for that. Anyways, this go around, I'm going to. I think I need to put more on there. So 2 layers. So I'm used to doing my nails at a certain length. During this time, it's been growing out. Right. So, what other type of adjustments do you think, the media had to make? Now that Biden was president. Yeah, and did they make fun of their presidency? Right? You know how they have political cartoons and, um, the television shows where they mock them and even memes, right? I'm sure memes. Hmm. Right. And I didn't get to look at any memes either during the presidency, Biden's presidency. Any political cartoons or anything like that during Biden's presidencies. I didn't really, I didn't, uh, you know, it's not like I didn't notice it. It's just I really wasn't even on social media, you know, in that regard to even pay attention to that. Right? It wasn't like you know, the previous presidency where, uh, now, well, during that time, it was very funny. They came off as unprofessional. And I think that's the reason why it was it was very easy to make fun of them. And what were they doing even before they became, you know, cabinet members? Is that considered even a cabinet member, a press secretary? It just seems like they didn't have, a job before then. Right, because of this organization. And do you think it's because of the presidency, or do you think it's because of them as a person? You know, they just don't know. Yeah. Do y'all think that they know what they're doing during the Biden's presidency? Right. So, how do you even get a job in, you know, media and media in journalism? You know, right? Okay. There's also print journalism. So, with print journalism, when we think about journalism, what do we think about? Right, being on the scene. Mm-hmm. Right. Whereas, you know, but that's not what I'm talking about when it comes to politics. You don't really get to see their personality, right, in print, whereas you get to see their personality when, you know, they're visible and they're interacting with others, with other journalists. I don't know why my hands are sticky. I have to wipe off the inhibition layer anyways. Okay, careful. I got base layer on this one, but it's curious. I have to be mindful of what it is that I'm doing. So why was it so difficult, do you think, for others in media, other than the press secretaries, other others in media, to have to, deal with someone other than, well, the previous, the president previous to Biden, if that's all they know is their job. Right? And those who came in during, you know, the, the other president's administration, you know, I mean, I guess you just have to acclimate with what it is that, what's going on at the time, right? And even others in politics is the same way, I'm assuming, right? I'm trying to build up this nail. With this particular thing, I can do some type of sculpting. So let's see if I can do that. Right, and then file it later. Because I noticed that, before I prepped my nails before I got on camera. And I noticed that, to keep everything all the same shape, I needed to build out this nail. So making fun of other presidents, you know, right? Like the previous ones before, uh, you know, things became unprofessional, right? You know, did it get back to doing that? Right? Even comedy. You know, comedy has changed because of that. I'm sure, you know, Biden definitely, you know, kept the humor, you know, going. I notice he don't really take himself too seriously, but you know that he's a he's a real deal political person, right? That's all he knows in politics. He's been in politics for years. Right, but you know, you can have a personality. They make it seem like political people don't have personality. They're still people at the end of the day. We can talk about others. I don't feel like mentioning another political candidate either. Um, you know, and I understand how it would have been different had it been a female president. You know, do I feel like talking about it? Not really, right? Because from what is, you know, usual is that, you know, it's expected that it's going to be a male president. As far as with, you know, journalism, hmm you know, I'm focused on doing my nails. It's just like, yeah, no, I don't want to get distracted. Yeah, but as far as with journalism, uh, you know, right, right. Is it about the professionalism, you know, that maybe the Biden administration, you know, brought to, well, brought back to the, you know, political arena, political stage? So the bad boy of politics, right? Was that Biden or was that maybe his previous? Now, as far as with their press secretaries, how is their personality? Well, anyways, I'm sure that whoever he selected, they did their job, to the best of their ability. Uh, and did anyone, drop out? Did anybody drop out? During his 4 years. And then what's their relationship even with the Speaker of the House? Right? Because that's not necessarily journalism. I like that title. What does the Speaker of the House do? Now they also, you know, I guess get publicized on them in the media as well. You know, right? But that has nothing to do with Biden's presidency. They don't get voted in because of there being a new president. Now, with the press secretary, what they have to do is, brief the other reporters and such about what it is that, the president is up to, what they're doing, any changes that are being made, and things of that nature. And, with Congress, you know, what is it about Congress? You have to put up with the president. I'm sure that's different. And, how they interact and what they have to say to, the press is that's on them. Do the press secretary, do they, let Congress know about what the president wants to do? You know, do they sit and listen to the the press secretary of the president, well, we're talking about Biden's administration, so do they have to sit and listen to the press secretary? Not obviously within, you know, uh, that, uh, you know, whether it's at the Rose Garden or inside. I don't know why I'm laughing. Right within their enclosure. However, listening to their statements, if you are a congressperson, right, all you can do is laugh, probably. Well, I don't know about Biden's administration, right? Now, the previous one's administrations, right, it seems like, right, it's a circus. It really was a circus. And in some instances, at least you can find some humor, right? Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't want to do too much filing. I hope with 2 layers of this. Okay. Right. I hope with 2 layers of this, it's gonna still give me that structure that I need for this month. I'll probably do that for later. I don't know why I'm laughing during this episode. The drill. Right, what is it that I also don't know? Right. And that's the thing. So I'm actually speaking about what it is that I don't know. Right. Yeah, so many people want to know the process. what it is that I'm doing. You already know I'm doing my nails. But as far as with people wanting to know the process of, I guess, becoming a journalist, yeah, but in the political sphere, how different is it? Why do I feel like I don't have enough structure to even this now? Well, yeah, I'm not gonna redo this again. Okay, go ahead. Right. So feeling isolated in the world, uh, or dealing with some type of, you know, I don't want to say political isolation, but just, you know, looking at the news, being isolated from looking at the news. You know, how am I supposed to know what's going on? I don't know what's going on. And I'm trying to be as classy as possible. Let me continue to be classy. I don't know what's going on. I didn't know what was going on. You know, and for others who have been isolated, during, the Biden administration, you know, isolation can happen and can, take, uh, form in many ways. Right. You don't have to be on lockdown. And it could just be a choice. I don't feel like being bothered with, you know, looking at the news, being entertained by any type of political stuff. That's another thing as well. A lot of people. Did anybody during the Biden administration, get locked up? did anyone get a book deal? What was any scandals that was happening during the Biden administration? You know, was it boring? You know, him being, or the state of America, but the way that politics is. Now we're back to, basic politics, not basic politics, but, politics as, they already know it to be. So, now I know that it didn't affect the Speaker of the House. Uh, I mean, I guess it depends on how, close someone was to them. That's only if, uh, like people build relationships with people, not relationships, but, friendships with others. Right. Then, they get promoted to certain things, certain cabinet positions, or, rankings in the political, in the United States political um, um, you know, system. Right, but isolation can be a choice. Like I isolated myself by my choosing, of my choosing. It's just that now, and I think because I don't know what's going on, I can have an unbiased approach to asking questions. Let me just. So I have a nail that's. I don't feel like applying more product to it. But I know that overall, I kind of want the look to look a certain way. I'm trying to correct it without having to, reapply that much product to it. Okay, I think I followed these, and I think this one is the same way. So this is somewhat corrected. I think I did this part. This is good. This is okay. That's okay, but this is more. I don't think the Biden administration uh, press secretaries needed help, did they? Right? It seemed like they kind of knew their job, right? Well, I can only assume. Hmm. So the breath of fresh air when, you know, there was, when the journalism has gotten better. Oh, right. A lot of people wanted, you know, the president before Biden to get out of office. Okay, so I had to sculpt this now. I'm realizing this now while I'm filing. I had to sculpt this now. This is compared to this. Let me just go ahead and file this. need this to be even. So I sculpted it, but it's, see, it might not have cured. I noticed that it's more rounded than squared like the last episode, how it was. Right, so I want to continue its shape. And it seems more rounded, but it was sculpted somewhat. But now compared to the other nails, what I'm realizing is, it might end up being shorter than the rest because I don't want it to have that curvature to it. Okay. Alright, and this. I'm okay with that for right now. The thing about this, about my, about, the drill is that I think the filing takes the most time. Right, perfecting its shape. Or perfecting the shape. So I got some new files from since last time I did the show, the drill. And I prepped my files. I noticed that you know because the last time I was filing for a while, and I noticed that it was very dull. The files were very dull. So I got new files for today. Let me try this other one. I filed my nails before then, because I prepped my nails off camera. Let's see how this is. I didn't do much filing. I just filed it just to do the shape. Now it's different with the natural nails than it is with, because I just took off the gel polish. can you take Biden administration, his press secretary seriously? That's another thing as well. What did other media journalists? Um, I hope I'm saying that right. I wonder what they thought about it. About them compared to the previous administration before Biden. I hope I don't get my show interrupted. Next time, I don't know if I need to. So my nails curve, my nails curve when they get long, and I think with a lot of people as well. I don't know if you don't have that problem, that same problem. So what I do is, and the reason why uh, I'm filing so much is because of that. I don't want my nails to. I mean, I can have my nails the way that it is, but when it curves down and it grows out, um, it's not about affecting the shape of the nails, but it's just like, you know, I mean, it does affect the shape of the nails, right? Not visibly, right? But underneath it, and because it files down, you know, with this product on there, I don't have to necessarily, like for example, y'all can't see this. It doesn't matter. But that's not why y'all want to tune into this. What's the conversation that we're having? I'm just doing my nails in the meantime. What's the conversation that we're having? Did they need help? Were they struggling in any way? Or anybody during during the Biden administration? Were they struggling to do their job? The best. You know, I don't want to say effectively, Were they struggling to do their job? Other than Biden, we know that Biden had health issues. Or did they seem like they wanted to fit in? Were they out of place? Right, they got appointed their jobs. Hmm. Yeah, but to others, did they seem like they were out of place? Right, compared to, the circus of the last administration. They don't know what they're talking about. You ever spoke to someone and it's just like, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. I said heck. Okay. You don't know what in the world you're talking about. I'm practicing on myself to be more classy and elegant in my speech as well. Did they have those difficulties? And outside of politics, like how are they outside of politics? You know, the press secretary. Like once they're off the job, how do you think that they are? Right? When they're not in front of the camera. Now, how are they? Right? They're probably, family oriented. That's another thing as well. Like they have families to go home to, I'm sure. Right, and so how do you think their families feel about them? Right, we seen you on television, doing your job. Right, and are their political interests, hopefully they have the same political interests, but, right, they have to, I guess, learn, you know, hey, what are you going to say the next day, when you go to work? They don't know. So, you look at them on their job and it's just like interesting. And the media can be, difficult, right? Some people, they talk about media training, uh, being on guard, I guess, when it comes to being asked questions. Now, as far as with their look is their look. Anyways, you can only hope that they get respected on the job, though. Right? Because sometimes they say that, like, right, the media is tough. Maybe the media is mean. What are some other things they say about, journalists? They can't treat us like that, saying and then say that, oh, they're just doing their job. That's part of the job. I'm just doing my job. Right? Is that an excuse? I always forget to show what it is next time. Next time. Again, I know that y'all are here for the conversation. So, anyways, now I gotta figure out what color am I gonna get. So we do that now. All right. No. I'm gonna do the colors that I usually don't particularly wear. So I wore this one. I did this color. I don't know when I did this color. Did this color. Because I didn't do this color, so I'm gonna go with this color. And then I'm gonna reset. I don't know what I'm gonna do. But anyway, I'm gonna do this color. Did this color. I'm gonna do this color. So we're gonna do this, and that. Yep. I think I need more alcohol in here. Darn it. I have alcohol in here. So yeah, back to what I was saying about filing. I want my nails when they grow out to grow straight and not necessarily be bent, curving down. I know when they grow out, it's going to eventually, uh, because you know, that's what my nails usually do. However, I can reset it how I can reset it how I do. Like reset, more like a rebalance, a rebalancing of the nail. You know what it is when you get a refill, or sometimes they call it a fill-in. So as far as with the look, when it comes to the Biden administration, you know, how did they look compared to, others? who previously had that press secretary um, position, in the way that they looked didn't make a difference in how Biden looked. Now, we understand that he had issues, right? But they had to talk to other journalists about what it is that he wanted to do as a president. Yeah, and that's another thing too. He didn't have any other type of scandals. Like when you think about Biden, President Biden, well, it didn't seem like he had a lot of scandals because of his previous, you know, but not his previous career, because we know that he was previously vice president, but all those other times in politics. So he wasn't like a president that was full of scandals. So I think it made it easier for the press secretaries to do their jobs because they didn't have to, you know, answer questions about, you know, what type of scandal, you know, did they pay taxes or, you know, financial records and things of that nature. Right? It was just focused mainly on the United States government. Whereas with the previous president, not the previous president, but before Biden, you know, I'm sure it was difficult to do that type of job, uh, being a press secretary, having to answer, for that president. And then other, people around him going to jail. And I'm sure that's not what it was during the Biden administration, right? But, how do you answer? So, impeachment. They're not thinking about impeaching Biden. And, Kamala Harris, I guess, being the vice president of Biden, what does she have to answer for or answer to? It's only to the press secretary that they have to answer. What is it that the president wants to do? Yeah, and that's another thing too. People just be talking just to be talking. Like that's not their job. I mean, they have to talk on the job, but that's not their job to just be talking just to be talking. You know, they come out, a whole bunch of cameras in front of them, and people with writing pads and recorders and stuff, and you know waiting to hear them speak. They're the Speaker of the White House, which is the president's press secretary, not like the Speaker of the House. When you think about the Speaker of the House, right, the House of Representatives, no, right? Isn't it both that and the Senate? But they call it the Speaker of the House. With the House of Congress or something. Anyways, we have speakers. Uh, you know, the president's press secretary. What is it that the president is doing now? Yeah. How do you feel about Biden? You know, and his health care and his health scare. You know, is he good enough to do the job? How's everything? How's right in the event of things happening? What do you think? And how are they supposed to know? Would they come up with an answer? I'm sure. Is it a good enough answer? I don't know if I'm gonna do matte or shiny on these on my top coat for these nails. I mean, I have an idea about what I want to do, but let's see. Some open. Okay. Let's see. Oh, matte or shiny? I think I want to go matte. Yeah. I don't even remember the last time I wore this color. So let's go on ahead with matte. You know, do they get hurt on a job when it comes to, their feelings? Right? Maybe it's not, you know, how people, uh, say things and it can hurt our feelings. You know, do they get hurt on the job when it comes to the things that people say about them? Or maybe reports being written up about them of how they're doing their job during you know, Biden administration, during the Biden presidency. Yeah, I do other people think about them? And it's just like, what they need to know is that as long as you're doing your job and you're doing the job to right the best of your ability, it doesn't matter what other people have to say. In some instances, we do care about what other people think about us. Right, criticisms. Type of criticisms that they have to deal with. Not constructive criticisms, or is it negative criticisms? Right, or is it just that boring of a presidency where it's just like, oh, okay. I didn't even look at these ones. Yeah, I like these. So far, almost done. All right. What do I usually do? Okay. Anyways. Okay. We're just gonna keep it as is. Do that like that. I want y'all to see the shape of the nails. I spent so much time shaping the nails. It's just like I really want y'all to focus on that, but it doesn't make a difference. Again, I understand that y'all are only here for the conversation and you know while I'm doing my nails. So thank you for joining me for the second episode of You Know the Drill.